Hello again. Today you should be seeing this video on at least Valentine's Day. That's when I want to upload it. It's the most amazing love story that I've ever known and actually ever been part of. Ever to witness, in fact. It's a motivational story, a story of manifestation, and a story of love. I think it might be both, because, what is the one thing we'd all love to manifest in our lives? Love. And this is a story of a young boy, really, manifesting life, manifesting love in his life, and how that boy has touched so many lives. Probably touched yours and you don't even know it. You would never know his name, highly unlikely, but you would have seen his work, let's put it that way. And this story is just inspirational to me. I say it's about love, fate, and how life can come full circle in the most unexpected ways. And before I get to the heart of it, let me tell you about Patricia. Patricia Staines. Now, she owned a lovely little antique store in a village called Debenham, which is in the UK in Suffolk. And it's one of those quiet, charming, chocolate box type little villages. And I lived there. It was an apartment attached to the antique shop. And I shared that place. Slept mainly on the sofa. I was young. I still am young. I shared that place with the manager of the store, and we had a great time. There was him, me, and Patricia's son as well, and we just lived life, enjoyed ourselves. Patricia also had a daughter, and I got to know that family really well. Patricia, now, she was a warm, kind, caring woman, full of those stories, antiques. Now, she came from a very wealthy family, exceptionally wealthy family. And the story she told, I won't forget them. They were great fun. Now, Patricia, she went off to America for a holiday, vacation, however you want to call it. Nothing unusual about that. I think she went to what was it called? Los Angeles, Hollywood. Short trip, a break from the shop, I guess. She never really worked in the shop. I didn't know what she did. She just lived. And she came back. Something was different. Something was new, interesting. She came back, and right away you could really tell something in her eyes. There was a change. It wasn't just like that coming back off holiday experience. She came back with a story. Now, she took the three of us, me, the manager, and her son, and she said, look, you're my boys, and I've got something to tell you. And I need you to meet someone. She said, I've met the love of my life. Well, you know what? We looked at each other and we were like, okay, what's going on here then? The love of your life? This was out of nowhere. But she was deadly serious. She told us that she'd met this guy in the US, and now, in 2 weeks or other, he was going to come to the UK, and she wanted us to meet him. I mean, we were all curious. We all wanted to know what the hell was going on. this man who suddenly captured Patricia's heart, and that we couldn't wait to meet this guy and see what was going on. Remember that day it finally came, and we waited there for them to arrive. They came in the apartment, and we sat around a really small round table, the 5 of us. I don't know if we had something to eat, I can't remember. It's definitely something to drink. And we really wanted to meet this American guy who stole Patricia's heart. We were expecting, well, I don't know what we were expecting. Maybe a tall, tanned American, with that Hollywood smile. But when he arrived, not that at all. This was a surprise. He walked in and he spoke. He's English. We all looked at each other confused. Patricia met him in Los Angeles and is English. So not only did they meet in Los Angeles and he was English, but he also was born not too far away from where we were, in Suffolk. This is crazy. And as you can imagine, we're chatting away, and we just sort of said, well, come on then, how did you two meet? What's the story? And that's when Patricia took a real deep breath and she smiled and she said, well, I was invited to this high-end party. You know the sort, well, I say you know the sort, it's what you hear about, with all the film stars in Hollywood, producers, etc. And it's like, there's already, like, it felt like it was already a start of something out of a movie in of itself. She had been invited to this party, rubbing shoulders with actors and producers and all sorts of famous people. She said she walked into the room, taking it all in, and then suddenly, across the room, her eyes met David's. And she said, like, everything just disappeared. The crowd, the noise, everything faded away. It was like someone had parted the sea of people and made a path straight between them. And without thinking, she walked right up to him. And do you know what the first thing she said was? She looked him straight in the eyes and she said, where were you? Okay. We're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, you've got us. We're totally hooked on this story. What's going on? This man, this so-called stranger, she walked up to this guy, or stranger, at least we thought he was, and the first words out of the mouth were, where were you? And David, he just looked right back at her and said, I was there. Now you can imagine, the 3 of us were just confused, probably as you are as well. What on earth is this supposed to mean? I mean, this is a story here. This is not their first meeting, is it? And David turned around and he said, at the table, he turned around to us 3 and he said, I'll take it from here. And that's when he told us his side of the story. He takes a deep breath and starts telling us something we never expected. I can guarantee you never expected this either. He said when he was a little boy, around 3 or 4, he was walking up the lane near his home when out of nowhere something hit him on his head, a conker. Surprised, he looked up and saw this little girl perched on the tree branch waving at him, and she had this big mischievous grin on her face, and she climbed down, walked straight up to him, put her hand out and said, I'm Patricia Staines. And he looked at her and turned around and said, hi, I'm David Campling. And from that moment on, they became inseparable. the best of friends. Every single day they could, they'd meet up, run around, play together, just two kids in their own little world. Until one day, David, he stopped coming. Patricia, you can imagine, she was heartbroken. She had no idea why he just disappeared. And that was the day, all those years later, in that party in Los Angeles, when David finally told her the truth of what happened on that day. Now, you can imagine Patricia standing there in that party trying to process everything. She had spent her whole life wondering why David suddenly disappeared. And now, after all these years, I think it was something like, I want to say 40, 45 years, she was about to get her answer. And David told us back then, he said back then when he stopped showing up, it wasn't by choice. One day, just like always, he walked up to Patricia's house and knocked on the door. Now, this was a pretty big house, and he wasn't allowed to go to the front door. He had to go to the back of the house, what they call the tradesman's entrance, the kitchen door. He knocked on the door, and Patricia's mother opened the door and smiled at him. Lots of planes flying around here at the moment, it's mad. Yeah, Patricia's mother opened the door, welcomed him in. She picked him up and put him on a stool in the kitchen, and then in the calmest voice asked him a simple question. David, do you love my daughter? Do you love my daughter Patricia? Well, without any hesitation, that little David turned around and said, yes, of course I do. Then she asked, would you do anything for her? And once again, he answered, of course I would. Then the mother's voice changed. Her tone changed. She leaned in and said, you already know where this is going, don't you? David, you live in the lane, in one of the small houses we own. Your father, he works on our land. But Patricia belongs here in this big house. One day, she will grow up, go to university, and become someone very important. But there is a problem. She loves you just as much as you love her. And if you keep on coming here, you'll hold her back. Now, David was a little boy. He didn't understand class, wealth, or status. He just knew he loved Patricia. And then the mother asked him the impossible. She turned around to him and she said, if you truly love her, can you do something for me? Can you walk away and never come back? Not because you don't love her, but because you do. Because she deserves to become everything she's meant to be. And with tears in his eyes, that little David said, yes, I can. I'm almost in tears every time I tell this story, right even now. Now Patricia's mother picked him up off that stool, set him gently onto the floor. She opened the door. David walked out. The door closed behind him. He never saw Patricia again. Not until that 40-something years later, that night in Los Angeles. You can imagine Patricia hearing that. After all those years, tears in her eyes, all this time she had believed that David had simply left her, forgotten about her, moved on. And now she realized he walked away because he loved her. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and finally asked the question that we also had on our minds. She turned around and she said, How are you here? How are you in Hollywood at this party with all these rich and famous people? How did you go from that little boy to that little boy who lived in the house at the bottom of the lane to standing right in front of me tonight? David, he smiled apparently, and a knowing smile, and he said, I knew that one day I would meet you again, and I knew that when I did, I had to be someone your mother would approve of. We all looked at him confused. He said, I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't just work on the land like my father and his father before him. I had to make something of myself. So I left. I eventually came to America. I worked my way up in the film industry, and eventually I became a sound producer, and a very successful one. Well, we were absolutely stunned. Of course, telling three lads who worked on films, which films did you work on? Tell us now. I remember he laughed, and he turned around and he said, oh, Platoon, The Terminator, a few others. You worked on Platoon. Are you joking? Well, there was a scramble. I remember we just turned round, and behind us was this little teeny tiny TV with the video player and the videos next to it, all of which were at the end of the tape. We grabbed the Platoon case, we opened it, we slid it into the machine and pressed play, and we just said, can you just remind us what's your surname? He said, David Campling. We looked at the credits, and there it was, David Campling. His name was in the credits. We were amazed, still amazed to this day. Patricia, she was there, she's shaking her head as she watched us, taking it all in. This was the boy she loved, the boy who disappeared, the boy who had given up on her so she could have the life her mother wanted for her. And now, wow, just looking across here, it looks like a little doe. Today is a day of nature. Yeah, this little boy had given up on her, and now he was standing right in front of her, successful, accomplished, ready to be in her life again. She had lost him once. She is not going to lose him again. Now, things happened. I think the shop closed down, and I think it's now someone's house. Still there, the apartment next to it. You can Google it, have a look. It's right at the end of one of the little high streets. There's only one street there, to be fair. I travelled the world. The manager, I think he went to work in a prison, and the son, I think he went away as well. But I remember sitting there once, many years later, and now I'm not a big watcher of the Oscars, but for some reason this particular year I had it on and it was playing there, and I was doing what I do. I don't even have a TV now, but I remember it playing there, and like something. Well, I was interested is that obituaries things, the memorandum. I can't hardly say it. That section began, and the names and the faces of all the different people who passed, whether they be those who were actually on screen and those who worked behind the scenes. And suddenly, there was a picture of David. Search his name online, you can find that picture. He's got like a glass of, like a cocktail glass in his hand, smiling away with a cheeky grin, bless him. And the most amazing thing I read, it had David Campling, his year that he was born and passed, and the films that he worked on. You know, he was a well-renowned sound producer. And the most amazing sentence I read next. Below it was a small note saying, "Survived by his wife, Patricia Campling." And I sat there, I just stared, and I was absolutely amazed. Patricia, she was with him. She married him. After everything, they found their way back to each other. Now, you know, he's gone. I sat there. I think I'm still processing it now. It's just so amazing. From that little boy who got hit on the head with a conker, to the man who made his name for himself in Hollywood, to Patricia's greatest love. David's story had come full circle, and in a way, so had Patricia's. Even after all those years apart, after all the heartbreak, after everything that kept them from being with each other, in the end, they got their time. So, amazing, huh? The power of manifestation, I guess, and the power of love. Yeah, I guess that is it. David manifested the whole thing. Think about it. He was just a little boy when Patricia's mother told him he wasn't good enough, that he was destined to work on the land while she would go to become someone important, that if he truly loved her, he would walk away and never come back. And so he did. But instead of accepting fate, David rewrote his story. He didn't just disappear into a life of quiet regret. He built himself into the kind of man who could walk back into Patricia's life, not as a worker on her family's land, but as an equal. He eventually left for America. He worked his way up. He became a sound producer for some of the biggest films of the time, Platoon, The Terminator, the kind of films that win Oscars, and I'm sure that you've seen some of those films. Like I say, you may not know his name, but for sure you know some of his work. You can go on to IMDb, whatever it's called, and check his name there, and it will show you all the films he worked on. Now, I don't think this is a coincidence. I don't think this was luck. I think David knew, deep in his heart, that he would see her again. And because he believed so strongly, the universe, it had no choice but to make it happen. He had lost her once. He wasn't about to lose her again. So, when he finally stood in front of her at that party, after all those years, all that time apart, and she asked him, "Where were you?" All he had to say was, "I was there." Because he had been. Every single moment, every choice, every sacrifice, he had been walking back to her all that time. And the best part of this manifestation, it worked. David, he got his happy ending. He got the love of his life. No one could tell him he wasn't good enough anymore. And now, sitting there, watching the Oscars, seeing his name appear in the memorandum section, I realize David, he'd won. Not just in Hollywood, not just in life, but in love. And if that's not the proof that manifestation doesn't work, I don't know what is. What about you? Are you ready to win in life? Not just life, but win in love. I love you.